This video is sponsored by Squarespace. This is an 8-inch Dobsonian, this is a 71mm Apple refractor, and this is a 30mm smart telescope with small binoculars as an add-on. These are all great recommendations for a beginner telescope, but each for a different kind of beginner who wants different things from the hobby of amateur astronomy. So in this video, I'm going to bring you through some tests, of course, that I did with each of these telescopes and show you some images, but I'm really going to focus on the user experience and what kind of astronomy experience each of these telescopes really excels at. My name is Nico Carver, and let me quickly disclose these three telescopes were sent to me from High Point Scientific, ASCAR, and ZWO, respectively. I'm mostly an astrophotographer, and that is what I focus on with this channel and my Patreon as well. But in addition to photography, this video will also consider people who want to look through telescopes at an eyepiece, which we call visual astronomy. And there's actually one more term that I want to throw at you, which is electronically assisted astronomy, EAA. And EAA is sort of in between visual astronomy and astrophotography. You're using a camera instead of an eyepiece. So that sounds like astrophotography. But with astrophotography, we gather lots of pictures, we bring them onto the computer, and we stack them on the computer and process them. And astrophotography processing is like half of the hobby. It's a huge part of learning astrophotography. Well, with EAA, what you capture is stacked live, or you just watch a video of the night sky, and you can save the pictures, but typically you don't have to do any other processing to them. Just whatever you stacked live is what you got. And so it's more experiential. So that's sort of the range of user experiences we're going to go over: visual astronomy, electronically assisted astronomy, and astrophotography. We'll be looking at some different objects in the night sky. So for this comparison, I've picked probably the three best beginner objects because they're bright, they're interesting to look at, and they're easy to find in the night sky. So we'll look at the moon, Jupiter, and Orion Nebula. The moon is where I would start as a beginner with a telescope. It's the brightest object in our night sky, and no matter what kind of telescope you use, you can get a very nice view of it visually. With the moon, I prefer the view through the 8-inch Dobsonian since it offers the most detail and with no false color like you can get with refractive optics. However, with a nearly full moon like tonight, if you just put in an eyepiece, no matter what eyepiece it is, with no filter and no Barlow, the view through a big, fast Dobsonian like this is going to be too bright. It won't damage your eyes, but it will be uncomfortably bright for extended viewing. So I do recommend using a filter. This is called a variable polarizing filter that just darkens the image through the polarization effect. So it has two polarizing filters on here that you rotate to change the amount of light getting through without changing the color. So you can also use this on Jupiter and actually see the true color of Jupiter. Apertura does include a moon filter with this telescope, which darkens the image, but it also turns the image green, which isn't my favorite way to view the moon. Once you get the right brightness level, though, whether it's with a filter or a Barlow, the 8-inch Dobsonian is my favorite of these three. Two reasons. With a stool, it's the most comfortable of the three for extended viewing, and you'll want to look at the moon longer because the telescope offers the most detail. So you can really push the magnification with your eyepiece choice and then look at very fine details and just really examine all the craters on the moon. For EAA, for live viewing of the moon, nothing's easier than the sea star. You just turn it on, say, go to the moon, it finds it for you, it autofocuses, and you have a live video of the moon you can watch right on your phone. You can push in with this 2x and 4x thing to get closer views, and it's just so easy. And then finally, for astrophotography, the usual way to do it is to take a video capture of the moon in terms of cameras. You can use a mirrorless camera, which is what I did with the Dob or with the refractor. If you use a mirrorless camera with the Dob, you do have to get a low profile T adapter, or you could also use a planetary camera. But if you're using a planetary camera with the Dob, you'd only get a small section of the moon, not the whole thing. If you want to use a DSLR with the Dobsonian, you'd also need to use a Barlow lens to push back the focus point. You can't use a DSLR just in prime focus. For the moon and planets, this is fine to use a Barlow, but when you get to deep sky, I don't really recommend a Barlow, so then the Dobsonian and DSLR combination doesn't really make sense. So first presented here, you're going to see the actual size as captured from these three telescopes, and now presented so that the lunar features are scaled to match the biggest view, which was from the Dob. And you can see from that while the C-Star was the easiest to use, the Dobsonian with the biggest aperture gives us the best resolution for lunar detail. So my rankings for the moon, I'm giving it to the Dobsonian for visual. It offered the best views. It was the most comfortable to use. And again, the Dobsonian for astrophotography. If you have a mirrorless or planetary camera, it's not too hard to do astrophotography, and the picture will turn out the best of these three. And for EAA, electronically assisted astronomy, I'm giving it to the C-Star, just because it was so simple to set up, get a nice video feed of the moon using the C-Star, being able to punch in, look at some details. And on a cold night, that simplicity is just worth a lot to me. So when I just want a simple EAA experience, I always reach for the C-Star to do that. Okay, next up we have Jupiter, and visually with the C-Star binoculars, you could easily see the Galilean moons, but no surface detail. With the refractor, you can clearly see the cloud bands on the surface of the planet, but the view of the surface of Jupiter looked a little bit flat to my eye, like just a little... didn't really have much pop, and there's a little bit of color fringing around the edge of the planet. With the 8-inch Dobsonian and an 8mm eyepiece, it was clearly, I could see the cloud bands, but then there was a lot of variation in color on the surface of the planet that made it more interesting to look at, and there was also a bit more of a 3D feel compared to the Apo refractor. Just like with the moon or Jupiter or any planets, I would take the Dob over the other two when it comes to visual. For EAA, the C-Star had no problem finding Jupiter and keeping it centered, and it can be interesting just to watch Jupiter's major moons, called the Galilean moons, rotate around the planet, but the C-Star S30 Pro does not seem to resolve any surface detail. So it's not as interesting. Like with the moon, the advantage of the refractor on a tracking mount is that it keeps Jupiter centered, while with the Dobsonian, you have to keep manually moving it to keep Jupiter centered. But for a small object like Jupiter, the Dobsonian offers the best views. So I will also give it to the Dob for EAA. For astrophotography, it is best practice to take a video, and a high frame rate video as you can, and stack the best frames. And this way you can try to sort of beat the seeing. It's called lucky imaging. And here are the results for actual size, and then here is what we get if we scale them up. I did not use a Barlow lens, but it probably could have helped with Jupiter to get better magnification on the planet. But in any case, the test shows that the Dob is once again your best option of these three for the planets, because aperture is really king when it comes to planetary imaging. So 8 inches or 203 millimeters definitely beats 30 or 71. So the Dobsonian swept the board for planetary. It was my favorite in all three categories. The refractor comes in second in all three, and the C-Star S30 Pro with C-Star binoculars comes in third in all three categories. It is capable of observations of Jupiter's moons, but it's too small to really make out any surface detail on the planets. So now let's turn to Orion Nebula, and I observed it before the moon rose. So it was a dark sky, and it was a Bortle 3 dark sky. That's my home sky, is Bortle 3, so very dark. Visually, with a zoom eyepiece, I could spend half an hour easily at the Dob, just taking it in at different magnifications. And after some time looking at it, I could see really subtle variations in color, tons of beautiful detail in the nebular structures. You can make out the trapezium cluster very clearly. With the 71mm refractor, I could see a lot of that, but some of the detail was missing. And again, like I mentioned with Jupiter, the view just felt a little bit flat compared to the Dob, which felt more 3D. And after many minutes looking at it with the refractor, I still didn't see much color. It just looked pretty gray. While with the Dob, I could see some greens and reds. The C-Star binocular view is interesting in that it's a much wider field of view than either telescope. And so Orion Nebula isn't quite as interesting to look at, but it's fun to see the nebula in the broader context of more stars. And what I really like to do with binoculars is switch between naked eye and binocular view very quickly. And that just, it feels cool. It feels like all of a sudden your eyes can just sort of zoom in on that section of sky. For EAA live stacking, this is where the C-Star S30 Pro really shines, in that in just a few minutes, you can go from turning this thing on to having a beautiful live stacked view of Orion Nebula on your phone that just keeps getting better and better for like the next 20 minutes as you just watch it develop. And so if you're brand new to astronomy, nothing is going to be easier than the C-Star for electronically viewing deep sky objects. And then lastly, we have astrophotography, and my favorite. And especially nebula astrophotography is my very favorite thing. And this is the one category where the traditional refractor on an equatorial mount is going to really shine. This is what this telescope rig is really meant to do. It's more of a specialist rig. This is a deep sky astrophotography rig. However, the C-Star S30 Pro, which is a little bit more of a jack of all trades, is still pretty impressive for deep sky astrophotography, especially if you put it in EQ mode to take longer exposures. The Dobsonian is my least favorite user experience because it's hard to use, and it's also, you're limited on camera choice. You can't use DSLRs for deep sky astrophotography with the Dobsonian, at least not easily. You would need to use a Barlow to get focus. And so then the number of, deep sky objects that this is going to work with are pretty limited. I used a mirrorless camera, the Canon EOS-RA, with a low profile T adapter, using very short exposures and just letting the nebula drift through frame, recentering it manually about every 10 seconds. And with that process, taking about 270 at 0.4 seconds each, the picture did actually come out really good. For this, I didn't expect much, and I was pretty impressed by how well it came out. But I still think it doesn't compare to the final stacked images from the 71mm refractor or the C-Star S30 Pro. So to wrap up the Orion Nebula deep sky category, the Dob won on visual for sure. The C-Star hands down wins on EAA, and the refractor a close second on EAA. The refractor wins on astrophotography, with the C-Star S30 Pro in a respectable second place. Okay, so now let's turn to price. The C-Star S30 Pro is currently on pre-order sale for $549 US, and the binoculars, if you want to get a visual experience along with your C-Star, are an additional $69. If you add the EQ tripod head and the better tripod, that's an additional $149. So total price for the C-Star route is somewhere between $549 and $770, depending on which accessories you get. The 8-inch Dobsonian is currently on sale for $699 US, and it includes 2 eyepieces, a laser collimator, a very nice right-angle finder scope, basically the Dobsonian mount. So basically all that you need to get started with this telescope visually, just looking through eyepieces. Personally, I'd maybe add a zoom eyepiece to your order. As a beginner to visual astronomy, I like zoom eyepieces because you can quickly get an idea for how much magnification is best for different objects and the sky conditions, and just sort of play around with the zoom. I think it's a lot of fun. Also, if you don't have a stool, you should probably pick up a stool to use this telescope comfortably. It's more of a seated style telescope. I like this collapsible stool called the Minimax. On the other hand, if you want to do astrophotography with the Dob, we would add about $300 for a planetary camera, maybe $500 for a laptop if you don't already have one that would work. So for visual, we're looking at $699, maybe $850 if you add a stool and a zoom eyepiece. But if you want to do EAA or photography, your price is going to go up. It depends on what kind of camera and laptop you want, if you don't already have one that would work. And then lastly, the refractor, the ASCAR 71F base price is $659 US. That comes with the telescope, the rings, the mounting gear, 2 eyepieces, and an erecting prism, but no mount. So if you wanted to use this telescope just for visual astronomy, we'd still need to add a mount. I would suggest something like an Altaz mount and tripod from SV Bony. That would add $250 to bring this to $900 just for visual. But for astrophotography, which is sort of what I would suggest using this for, the minimum mount I'd suggest is the Skywatcher EQ AL55i, which is currently going for $845 US. And then you would want a camera, a guide setup, ASIR probably. So the total for an astrophotography setup around this refractor total, we're looking at around $2,300 minimum. And so for a lot of beginners, that's going to sound like way too much money as a starter setup into the hobby. In my mind, it is a good investment. So if you have the money, you might want to just go for it because most of this stuff does hold a fair amount of value on the used market. So even if you change your mind or you upgrade later, you can sell off components. And speaking of upgrades, you can really build on this setup. You could change out the mount. You could change out the camera. You could just keep changing out components or just adding extra components to get different focal lengths. So that's really nice. But if you're really thinking budget astrophotography, probably the C-Star at around $500, $550 is more a budget option. And then budget visual, if $700 sounds too much for this Dobsonian, there are cheaper telescopes, but what I'd really suggest is find your local astronomy club, because for $40 in yearly dues, you can often get access to loaner telescopes just like this one, but also maybe like Schmidt-Cassegrains, which are great for planets. You can get access to club observatories, star parties, all kinds of cool stuff that astronomy clubs offer around visual astronomy. So to wrap up on these 3 beginner telescopes, my favorite for visual astronomy at the eyepiece, both because it offers the best, richest views and it's the easiest to use for visual, is the Apertura 88 8-inch Dobsonian. My favorite for electronically assisted astronomy is the C-Star S30 Pro. It just takes care of things for you because it's like a smart little robot that's app controlled. So if you want to quickly see a bunch of cool stuff in the night sky through your phone or tablet, the Smart Scope route is my choice for that for sure. And for deep sky astrophotography, my choice is the ASCAR 71F refractor. It's a very nice refractor. You can always upgrade if you wanted to go to longer focal length or bigger aperture later. But for starting out with deep sky, I think this is the perfect size and reach. It's small and light enough that you can use it on this mount, which is under $1,000. But at 490 millimeter focal length, it gives you enough reach to really get some nice details on all kinds of popular deep sky objects. If you get really into astrophotography like I am, you're probably going to want to share your pictures with the world. And the best way to do that is to have your own website with your own domain name. This video's sponsor, Squarespace, makes that super easy. My Squarespace site is at nicocarver.com, and when you set it up, you'll have many different, very easy to use options and templates for design. Mine is this fairly simple, but I think elegant portfolio site for my astrophotography. And if I ever want to change anything related to the design, Squarespace has an excellent design system called Squarespace Blueprint that makes that super easy to do. I also like that so much is built in, including a spam-free contact form and tons of selling tools. I haven't turned this on myself, but it's really nice to know that if I wanted to sell prints or services through my website, that would be really easy to turn on and set up and customize. Customers can pay however it's most convenient to them, whether it's PayPal, credit card, or Afterpay. So if you have a need for a website and want to try this out, head to squarespace.com/nebulaphotos for a free trial. When ready to make a first-time purchase of hosting or a domain, use code nebulaphotos at checkout for 10% off. That's it for this one. Till next time, this has been Nico Carver. Clear skies.